She was just closing up the diner when they grab her. Wrong place, wrong time. Overheard the wrong conversation. What the cocky gangsters didn't know, the shy waitress they kidnapped was married to a man the underworld called the Ghost King. And he was about to remind them why some names are whispered in fear. The neon sign outside Miller's diner flickered twice before dying completely. Lena Moretti didn't bother calling anyone to fix it. The owner had been saying he'd replace it for 3 years now. She wiped down the last booth, her worn sneakers squeaking against the checkered floor as she hummed something soft and forgettable. It was 11:47 p.m. 13 minutes until midnight, and she could finally go home. The diner sat on Route 9, a forgotten stretch of asphalt where the city's neon glow faded into darkness. Truckers stopped here. Late-night travelers. Sometimes people who didn't want to be seen. Lena had learned not to ask questions. She smiled, poured coffee, and collected her tips in silence. Tonight had been quiet. Too quiet, actually. Just one table of men in expensive suits who didn't match the peeling vinyl booths and burnt coffee smell. They'd sat in the back corner for 2 hours, speaking in low voices that occasionally sharpened into arguments. Lena had refilled their cups without making eye contact, the way she'd learned to do with customers who made her uneasy. She'd heard things. Words that floated across the empty diner when they thought she wasn't listening. Shipment. Thursday. Pier 7. 20 keys. Lena had pretended to be deaf. It was safer that way. Now they were gone, and she was alone, counting her tips in the harsh fluorescent light. $42. Not bad for a Tuesday. Alessio would be proud. He always made a big deal about her tips, kissing her forehead and calling her his hard-working wife, like she'd just won the lottery. The thought of him made her smile as she pulled on her jacket. He'd probably be asleep when she got home, sprawled across their bed with one arm reaching toward her empty pillow. He always slept better when she was there. Lena grabbed her purse, flicked off the lights section by section, and stepped outside into the cool October air. The parking lot was empty except for her beaten Honda Civic sitting under a dying streetlight. She dug for her keys, her breath forming small clouds in the cold. She didn't hear them coming. The black SUV appeared from nowhere, tires crunching on gravel as it cut across the parking lot and stopped directly behind her car, blocking her in. Lena's heart jumped, but she kept walking. Maybe they just needed directions. 3 men got out. She recognized them immediately, the expensive suits from the back booth. But now their faces were harder, their movements purposeful. The one in front was young, maybe 30, with slicked back hair and a cocky smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Evening, sweetheart," he said, his voice dripping with false friendliness. Lena's grip tightened on her keys. "We're closed." "Oh, we're not here for coffee." He stepped closer. The other 2 fanned out, boxing her in. "We're here because you've got big ears for such a quiet little waitress." Her blood went cold. "I don't know what you..." Pier 7. Thursday. 20 keys. He repeated the words she'd heard, watching her face. "See, that's the problem with these roadside dumps. The help hears everything." "I didn't hear anything," Lena said, her voice steadier than she felt. "I was just doing my job." "Maybe. Maybe not." He tilted his head, studying her like she was an interesting insect. "But we can't take that risk, can we? You understand." It wasn't a question. Before Lena could scream, one of the men grabbed her from behind, clamping a hand over her mouth. Her keys fell, clattering against the pavement. She tried to fight, her self-defense instincts kicking in, stomp on his foot, elbow to the ribs, but there were 3 of them, and they were stronger. "Easy, easy," the leader said, pulling out a cloth. "We're not going to hurt you. Just need to keep you quiet for a few days until our business is done. Think of it as a little vacation." The cloth pressed against her face. Chemical smell. Sweet and wrong. Lena's last conscious thought was of Alessio, reaching for her across their bed, and the cold dinner she'd left warming in the oven for him. Then darkness swallowed everything. The Honda Civic sat alone under the streetlight, driver's door still closed, keys glinting on the ground beside it. The neon sign flickered once more, then stayed dark. By the time the morning shift arrived at 6 a.m., the car would still be there, and the owner would call the police to report it abandoned. But by then, Lena would be 30 miles away, waking up with zip ties around her wrists in a warehouse that smelled like rust and old fear. And Alessio Moretti would be staring at a cold dinner and an empty house, his phone buzzing with a text message that would change everything. "We have your wife. She heard too much. Don't call the cops or she disappears permanently. Wait for instructions." The sender had no idea they'd just made the worst mistake of their lives. They had no idea that the quiet, gentle man who drove Lena to work every morning and kissed her goodbye like she was made of glass had another name in the shadows of the city. The Ghost King. And he'd burned the underworld to ashes once before, for far less than this. Alessio Moretti stood in his kitchen at 12:23 a.m., staring at the pot roast. It sat on the counter, still warm in its ceramic dish, covered carefully with aluminum foil. Green beans on the side. Mashed potatoes. Lena's handwriting on a sticky note. "Heat at 350 if I'm not home yet. Love you."
But she was always home by now.
He'd already called the diner twice. No answer. He'd driven past it 20 minutes ago. Dark, locked up, her car sitting alone in the parking lot like an abandoned ship. He'd almost stopped, but something felt wrong. The air had tasted metallic, dangerous. So he'd come home. Waited. Told himself she got a ride with Jenny, her coworker. Maybe car trouble. Maybe. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. Alessio's hand was steady as he opened the message, but something cold slithered down his spine as he read the words. "We have your wife. She heard too much. Don't call the cops or she disappears permanently. Wait for instructions." For exactly 3 seconds, Alessio stood completely still. Then he set the phone down gently on the counter. His breathing didn't change. His expression didn't shift. But something fundamental transformed behind his dark eyes, like watching a lake freeze over in time-lapse, warm water becoming deadly ice. He walked to their bedroom with measured steps. Lena had decorated it in soft creams and pale blues. Pictures of them covered the dresser. Their wedding day, a vacation to Cape Cod, last Christmas when she'd made him wear a ridiculous reindeer sweater. In every photo, she was laughing. In every photo, he was looking at her like she'd hung the moon. Alessio opened the closet and reached past her dresses to the back corner where a false panel had been installed 15 years ago. His fingers found the hidden latch. The panel swung open. Inside was a locked metal box. Inside that box were things he'd promised himself he'd never touch again. Things from a life he'd left behind the day he met a shy waitress who smiled at him like he was human. He opened it. The ring emerged first. Heavy gold, family crest engraved in the band, a ghost wrapped in thorns. The symbol of the Moretti family. The symbol that once made grown men confess their sins without being asked. Alessio slid it onto his right ring finger. Underneath was a leather-bound address book. Not phones, those changed. This contained places. People. Faces. Everyone who'd sworn loyalty once upon a time. Everyone who'd scattered when he'd walked away from the empire his father built. Everyone who owed him. The last item was a photograph, creased and faded. Alessio at 28, standing in front of a warehouse with 5 men beside him. All of them young. All of them dangerous. The caption on the back read, "The Ghost King's Council, 2008. He'd been Alessandro then. Alessandro the Ghost Moretti, named for how he'd dismantled 3 rival families without a single body ever being found. They'd simply vanished. Along with their money, their territory, their power. He'd been a nightmare in an expensive suit. Then he'd met Lena at a diner on Route 9, 7 years ago. She'd poured his coffee with shaking hands because she recognized his face from somewhere, news, maybe, or whispers. But she'd smiled anyway, asked if he wanted cream. Something in him had broken open. Or maybe healed. He wasn't sure which. Within 6 months, he'd walked away. Retired. Disappeared into suburban anonymity with a woman who made him want to be better than his bloodline. For 7 years, he'd been Alessio the husband. Alessio who worked remote IT consulting. Alessio who grocery shopped and fixed the leaky faucet and held his wife while she slept. The underworld had let him go because everyone knew one truth. If you force the Ghost King to come back, you'd better pray he killed you quickly. Alessio placed the photograph back in the box and closed it. He made 3 phone calls. The first was to Marcus Webb, his former consigliere, now running a legitimate security firm in Boston. Marcus answered on the first ring. Jesus Christ, Marcus breathed when he heard Alessio's voice. Is it really you? I need information on every small-time crew operating kidnappings in the tri-state area. Text me within the hour. Alessio, if you're coming back. I'm not back. But someone took something that belongs to me. His voice was quieter than a whisper and twice as deadly. Find them. The second call was to Vincent Calabrese, who owned half the legitimate businesses in the city and all of the illegitimate ones. Vincent had been his father's rival once. Then his partner. Then his friend. The ring's back on, Alessio said simply. Vincent was silent for a long moment. Then, who do I kill? Nobody yet. But I need eyes everywhere. Someone grabbed my wife tonight. They think she's just a waitress.
Madonna mia. Vincent breathed.
They don't know.
No.
They don't. The third call was to the diner's security company. Within minutes, Alessio had the footage from tonight emailed to his phone. He watched 3 men in suits kidnap his wife. Watched her keys fall. Watched the black SUV drive away. He screenshotted their faces. Then Alessio did something he hadn't done in 7 years. He smiled. It was the smile that had preceded the disappearance of the Santoro family. The smile that had made the Irish mob surrender territory without a shot fired. It was a smile that promised suffering. Alessio grabbed his keys and walked out into the night, the ring catching streetlight as he drove toward the city. The Ghost King was awake. And somewhere in a warehouse, 3 cocky gangsters had no idea that the shy waitress they'd grabbed wasn't harmless at all. She was precious. And precious things, when stolen from monsters, started wars. The Sapphire Room hadn't changed in 7 years. Alessio pushed through the heavy oak door at 1:47 a.m., and the conversations died like someone had cut a wire. The upscale bar sat in the financial district, invisible to civilians, essential to those who operated in shadows. Dark leather booths, mahogany bar, jazz playing soft enough to hide whispered confessions. 23 people were inside. Alessio recognized 18 of them. They all recognized him. Tony, the broker, Marchetti, saw the ring first. His whiskey glass stopped halfway to his mouth, amber liquid sloshing. His face went white. No, Tony breathed. No, you're out. You're. Alessio walked past him without a word, heading straight for the corner booth where Victor Calabrese sat with 2 of his lieutenants. Victor, 68, silver-haired, sharper than any knife, looked up and smiled like he'd been expecting this. Alessio. Drink. Information. Victor gestured to his men. They vanished instantly. Alessio slid into the booth, and the entire bar shifted. People leaned closer, straining to hear. Others pulled out phones, already texting. The news would spread like wildfire. The Ghost King is in the Sapphire Room. The ring is back on his finger. 7 years. Victor said quietly. 7 years of peace. I'd hoped it would last. So did I. Alessio placed his phone on the table, showing the screenshot of the 3 men. Black SUV, maybe 2020 or newer. They took my wife from Miller's Diner on Route 9 at midnight. They think she overheard something about a shipment. Pier 7. Thursday. 20 keys. Victor studied the faces, his expression darkening. Small-timers. Cocky idiots running cocaine through the port, thinking they're untouchable because they pay off a few customs officials. He looked up. Rico Valdez's crew. Venezuelan kid, maybe 32. Came up fast, burns hot. Doesn't know the old rules. Where does he operate? Warehouse district mostly. Has a gambling den on 5th Street, a chop shop in Riverside, and Victor paused. He's been bragging lately, saying the old guard is weak, that the new generation doesn't bow to ghosts. Alessio's expression didn't change, but his fingers drummed once against the table. He's about to learn why ghosts are feared. Alessio, Victor's voice carried warning. If you go loud, every young punk with a gun will think the throne is up for grabs. You'll start a war. I don't want a war, Alessio's voice was perfectly calm. I want my wife back. After that, I want these men to understand that some things are sacred. Victor nodded slowly. What do you need? Eyes on Rico's properties. Don't move. Don't interfere. Just watch. Text me any movement. Alessio stood. And Victor? Let the word spread. Let them know I'm looking. You want them scared. I want them terrified. Alessio walked toward the door, but Tony Marchetti stepped into his path. Tony was drunk, or pretending to be, his face flushed with liquid courage. You can't just come back, Tony slurred. You walked away. You don't get to put the ring on whenever it's convenient. Alessio looked at him. That was all. Just looked. Tony stumbled backward like he'd been shoved, his bravado evaporating. His hand shook as he moved aside. Alessio walked past him and out the door. Behind him, the Sapphire Room exploded into urgent conversations. By 2:30 a.m., the whispers had reached every corner of the underworld. At a strip club in Southside, a lone shark looked up from his cards and told his crew, Ghost King's back. Someone took his wife. In a penthouse downtown, a money launderer hung up his phone and immediately started booking flights out of the country. At an all-night diner where drug dealers counted cash, someone said, Rico Valdez is dead. He just doesn't know it yet. The name spread like a virus, carrying with it memories of things people had tried to forget. The Santoro disappearance. 12 men vanished overnight. Not killed, not arrested, just gone.
No bodies.
No evidence. The Ghost King had simply erased them. The Irish surrender. The O'Brien family, who'd controlled the docks for 30 years, woke up to find every ship they owned registered to shell companies, every account empty, every ally bought. They'd left the city within 48 hours. The Philadelphia silence. When the Castellano family tried to move into Moretti territory, the Ghost King had visited their dawn at 3 a.m. Nobody knew what was said in that conversation. But Castellano retired the next day and never spoke publicly again. Alessio didn't use guns. Didn't use violence. He used fear. He used precision. He dismantled lives so completely that people begged to confess, to cooperate, to please just make it stop. And now he was hunting. At 3:15 a.m., Alessio's phone buzzed. Marcus Webb. Rico Valdez crew. 6 members. Operating out of Riverside Warehouse, apartment building on 12th, and safe house near the industrial park. Attached, photos, addresses, known associates. They're moving product Thursday, exactly like your wife overheard. They probably grabbed her to keep her quiet until the deal's done. Another text. Boss, everyone knows you're looking. Half the city's already choosing sides. Be careful. Alessio didn't respond. He sat in his car outside the Sapphire Room, watching the city lights reflect off wet pavement. His phone buzzed again. Victor. Movement at the Riverside Warehouse. 3 cars arrived in the last hour.
They're fortifying.
They know you're coming.
Good.
Let them prepare. Let them gather weapons and loyal soldiers. Let them think they could fight a ghost. Alessio started his car and drove home. He had work to do, and it required the kind of cold, methodical planning that had made him a legend. By sunrise, Rico Valdez and his crew would understand one simple truth. You don't steal from a ghost. You become one. Lena woke to the smell of rust and motor oil. Her head throbbed. Her wrists ached. She tried to move and realized her hands were zip-tied behind her back, secured to a metal folding chair. Her ankles were bound separately. Professional enough to hold her, amateur enough to leave marks. She blinked against the dim light filtering through grimy windows high above. The warehouse was massive, concrete floor, exposed beams, stacks of wooden pallets creating maze-like corridors. Somewhere in the distance, water dripped with rhythmic persistence. 3 men sat at a card table 20 feet away, playing poker and drinking beer. The cocky one from the diner, their leader, she assumed, laughed too loud at something one of the others said. "She's awake," someone said behind her. Lena turned her head carefully. A 4th man stood near the door, younger than the others, maybe 23. He had nervous eyes and hands that wouldn't stay still. The leader stood stretching. Well. Good morning, sunshine. Sleep okay?" Lena said nothing. She'd learned long ago that silence was sometimes the smartest response. Instead, she studied them, the way Alessio had taught her during their late-night conversations when she couldn't sleep. "People tell you everything without speaking," he'd said once. "Watch their eyes, their hands. Who's confident? Who's scared? Who follows orders, and who gives them?" The leader, Rico, based on what she'd overheard, was all swagger. Expensive watch, designer sneakers, a gun tucked visibly in his waistband like a fashion statement. He wanted people to see him as dangerous. The 2 at the card table were older, harder. They watched her with flat, professional eyes. Experienced criminals. They didn't care about her. She was just a problem to solve. But the young one by the door? He couldn't look at her directly. His jaw was tight. He kept checking his phone like he wanted to be anywhere else. "You're probably wondering why you're here," Rico said, walking closer. He crouched in front of her chair, his cologne overwhelming. "See, you got unlucky. Right place, wrong time. Heard things you shouldn't have." "I didn't hear anything," Lena said softly.
Her throat was dry.
"I was just working. Maybe. But we can't take chances," he tilted his head. "Business is business. You understand. How long are you keeping me here?" "Just until Thursday. After our deal goes through, we'll drop you off somewhere safe. No harm, no foul," he grinned. "Think of it as a little adventure. Better than slinging coffee, right?" Lena didn't believe him for a second. Men who kidnapped witnesses didn't let them go. But she kept her expression neutral, scared but not hysterical. Let them think she was harmless. "My husband will be looking for me," she said quietly.
Rico laughed.
"Yeah? What's he gonna do, call the cops?" "We already texted him. He knows if he makes noise, you disappear," he stood, losing interest. "Don't worry about your husband, sweetheart. Worry about staying quiet and cooperative." He walked back to the card table. The men resumed their game. Lena sat perfectly still, but her mind raced. Alessio would be tearing the world apart right now. She knew him, knew the protective fury that lived beneath his gentle exterior. He'd find her. The question was whether she'd still be alive when he did. She needed to survive. She needed information. And she needed allies. Her eyes drifted to the young man by the door. Hours passed. The men rotated shifts. Rico left with one of the older men, leaving 3 behind. The card game continued. Someone ordered pizza. They ate, laughed, treated her kidnapping like it was just another Tuesday. Lena asked for water. The young one, she heard them call him Evan, brought her a bottle, carefully holding it to her lips while she drank. His hands shook slightly. "Thank you," she said softly. He nodded, not meeting her eyes, and retreated. Night fell. The warehouse grew cold. Someone threw a scratchy blanket over her shoulders. "Evan again." "You don't have to do this," Lena said quietly when he was close. "You could let me go." "Can't," he muttered. "Rico would kill me, then help me."
Just small things.
"Information." He looked at her then, really looked, and she saw the war in his eyes.
Fear. Guilt. Trapped.
"I'm not a bad person," he said, almost pleading. "I just
got in too deep.
Needed money. My sister's medical bills." He stopped himself. "Doesn't matter." "It matters," Lena said. Everyone's story matters. Evan stared at her for a long moment, then walked away. But she'd planted the seed. Around midnight, raised voices erupted near the card table. "Serious heat coming," one of the older men was saying into his phone. "Yeah, I'm telling you, people are spooked. Word is someone big is asking questions." "What kind of someone?" another asked. "The kind you don't want asking." He hung up, looking at his partner. "We might need to move her. Rico's stirring up problems." "Rico's an idiot," the other agreed. "Thinks he's untouchable." Evan shifted nervously by the door. What if this is a mistake? What if she really didn't hear anything important? "Too late now," one of the older men said coldly. "We took her. Can't untake her." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Lena's chest tightened, but she kept breathing steadily. A panic wouldn't help. She needed to stay sharp. Somewhere out there, Alessio was coming. She just had to stay alive long enough for him to find her. And maybe, just maybe, save Evan's soul in the process. Because if there was one thing Lena understood, it was that kindness could crack even the hardest walls. She'd done it with Alessio, after all. Alessio stood outside Jimmy's pawn shop at 4:32 a.m., waiting. The street was empty except for a homeless man sleeping in a doorway and a stray cat picking through garbage. Sodium lights cast everything in sickly orange. This part of town died after midnight and didn't resurrect until noon. The pawn shop security gate rolled up with a metallic screech. Jimmy Chin appeared, 60 years old and wiry, wearing a cardigan despite the cold. He'd been a fence for 30 years, moving stolen goods through legitimate channels. He'd also been on Alessio's payroll once upon a time, not for money, but for protection. "Mr. Moretti," Jimmy said quietly. His eyes went to the ring, then back to Alessio's face. "I heard you were asking questions. I need to know everything about Rico Valdez's operation. Where he keeps his money, who he trusts, where he feels safe." Jimmy unlocked the shop door and gestured inside. The space smelled like old electronics and desperation. Alessio followed him to the back office. "Rico's an arrogant kid," Jimmy said, pulling out a worn notebook. "Came up fast selling cocaine to college kids, graduated to importing. He's got connections in Venezuela, moves product through Pier 7 using a customs official named Davies. Pays him 50 grand per shipment. Properties? Warehouse in Riverside. That's his main base. Apartment building on 12th Street for stash houses. And a safe house near the industrial park for when things go sideways." Jimmy looked up. "Word on the street is he grabbed a woman." "Your woman?" Alessio said nothing, but something flickered behind his eyes. Jimmy swallowed hard. "He doesn't know who you are." Nobody told him because the new generation doesn't listen to the old stories. They think we're exaggerating. They'll learn Alessio's voice was perfectly calm. "What about his crew?" 6 guys. 2 are ex-military, real dangerous. 2 are local muscle, loyal but stupid. Then there's Rico's cousin Marco, psychopath, loves hurting people. And a kid named Evan Torres. He's the weak link. Sister's got cancer. He's in over his head, hates the work but can't get out. Alessio filed away every detail. "Where's Rico right now?" "His girlfriend's place, probably. Penthouse on Morrison Avenue. He thinks he's a kingpin." Jimmy hesitated. "Mr. Moretti, if you're going after him, people are watching. Young crews are wondering if the old rules still apply. If you show weakness, I won't. But if you go too hard, you'll start a war. Every ambitious punk with a gun will see an opening." "Jimmy," Alessio's voice cut through the air like a blade. "I don't care about empires anymore. I don't care about territory or respect or fear. I care about one thing. When I have her back, these men will understand what they took. Not through violence. Through something worse." Jimmy nodded slowly. "You always were the scariest when you were quiet." Alessio left an envelope on the desk, 5,000 in cash, and walked out. At 6:15 a.m., Alessio sat in a coffee shop across from Davies Custom Solutions, watching the building wake up. His phone had been buzzing constantly. Marcus,
Victor.
Associates he hadn't spoken to in years. all offering help, all positioning themselves for whatever came next. He ignored most of them. Instead, he sent one text to Victor. Need the customs official. Davies. Not hurt, just scared. The response came immediately. Consider it done. At 7:43 a.m., Michael Davies left his office for his usual morning cigarette. He was 46, balding, wearing a cheap suit. He lit up, checked his phone, and started walking toward his car. He never made it. Two men in expensive suits appeared on either side of him. Not threatening.
Just
Present. Mr. Davies. One said pleasantly. Someone would like a word. Davies looked around frantically, but the parking lot was empty. I don't know what you're talking about. Pier 7.
Rico Valdez.
50,000 per shipment, the man smiled. Ring any bells? Davies went pale. I want a lawyer. You're not under arrest. This is just a conversation. The man gestured to a black sedan.
Please.
They drove him to a warehouse in the financial district, sat him in a chair, left him alone for exactly 37 minutes, long enough for his imagination to conjure horrors. When the door opened, Alessio walked in alone.
He didn't speak.
He simply placed a manila folder on the table in front of Davies and opened it. Inside were photographs. Davies accepting cash from Rico. Davies falsifying documents. Davies' bank accounts, his mortgage, his daughter's college fund. All detailed with surgical precision. You're going to call Rico Valdez, Alessio said quietly, and tell him the Thursday shipment has been flagged. Tell him federal agents are asking questions. Tell him to abort and lay low. Davies' hands shook. If I do that, he'll kill me. If you don't, I'll send this folder to the FBI, your wife, and every news outlet in the city. You'll lose everything, your freedom, your family, your life. Alessio leaned forward slightly. Or you make one phone call, take the money you've already stolen, and disappear. Your choice. Who are you? Alessio stood without answering and walked toward the door. Wait, Davies called. What about protection? If Rico finds out I betrayed him, Rico will have bigger problems than you. Alessio left. Behind him, Davies sat trembling, staring at the folder that contained his entire life laid bare. By 9 a.m., Davies had made the call. By 9:30 a.m., Rico Valdez was screaming into his phone, his carefully planned deal crumbling. By 10 a.m., 3 of Rico's drug contacts had mysteriously stopped answering calls. By noon, Rico's gambling den had been raided by police acting on an anonymous tip. And Alessio hadn't thrown a punch, fired a shot, or raised his voice once. He'd simply reminded the streets of something they'd forgotten. The Ghost King didn't fight wars. He dismantled them, piece by piece, until his enemies begged for mercy that never came. Rico Valdez hurled his phone across the warehouse. It shattered against the concrete wall, pieces scattering like shrapnel. 3 contacts. 3. He was pacing like a caged animal, his expensive sneakers squeaking with each sharp turn. Davies is dodging my calls. The gambling den got raided, and now nobody will return my messages. Marco, his cousin, sat cleaning his gun with methodical precision. Could be coincidence. Coincidence. Rico's laugh was brittle. Everything falls apart in 12 hours, and you think it's coincidence. The 2 ex-military guys, Jackson and Torres, exchanged glances. Jackson spoke first, his voice level. Someone's coming after us. Question is who? Probably the Russians, Rico said, still pacing. They've been pushing into our territory. Russians don't work like this, Torres interrupted. They'd come loud. This is surgical. Professional. Lena sat in her chair 30 feet away, listening. Her wrists ached from the zip ties, but she kept her breathing steady, her expression neutral. She'd learned more from their panic than from hours of observation. They were unraveling. Evan stood near her, supposedly guarding, but really just looking miserable. He'd brought her breakfast, a gas station sandwich and orange juice, and loosened her restraints slightly when no one was watching. Did you do this? He'd whispered earlier. Somehow get a message out. How could I? Lena had replied softly. I've been tied to a chair. But she knew. Alessio was out there, dismantling their world piece by piece. At 2:17 p.m., Sal Giordano arrived at the warehouse. He was 63, gray-haired, wearing a tracksuit that had been fashionable in 1987. He'd been working the streets since before Rico was born, a connected guy, someone who knew everyone and everything. Rico practically ran to him. Sal, thank God. I need your help. Someone's targeting us.
Sal held up a hand.
His face was grave. Rico, sit down. I don't want to sit. I want to know whose.
Seat.
Down. Something in Sal's tone made Rico obey. Everyone gathered around Marco, Jackson, Torres, even Evan drifted closer. Lena watched from her chair, sensing the shift in atmosphere. Sal looked at each of them, then back to Rico. You grabbed a woman last night. A waitress. Yeah, she overheard the deal. We couldn't risk. What's her name?
Rico Blinet.
I don't know. We didn't exactly exchange pleasantries. Sal pulled out his phone and showed Rico a picture. This her? Yeah, that's her. Who is she? Sal's expression was somewhere between pity and horror. Her name is Lena Moretti. The name hung in the air like smoke. Jackson went rigid. Torres's face drained of color. Even Marco stopped cleaning his gun. Moretti. Jackson said slowly. As in Alessio Moretti. The Ghost King. Sal looked at Rico. You kidnapped the Ghost King's wife.
Rico laughed.
It sounded forced. That's a story. A legend. Some boogeyman the old-timers made up to keep people in line. I watched him dismantle the Santoro family in 3 days, Sal said quietly.
12 men.
They didn't die, they just ceased to exist.
No bodies.
No evidence.
No trace.
Like they'd never been born, he paused. I watched the O'Briens, who controlled the docks for 30 years, pack up and leave the city in 48 hours because he took everything from them without firing a shot. That was years ago. 7 years ago, he retired. Married that woman right there. Sal pointed at Lena. Word was he'd found peace. That he was done with the life. That if we left him alone, he'd leave us alone. The warehouse was silent except for the dripping water somewhere in the darkness. But you didn't leave him alone, Sal continued. You took his wife. And now. He laughed, but there was no humor in it. Rico, everything that's happened to you in the last 12 hours? That's just him warming up. Rico's cockiness cracked. So what do we do?
We.
Sal stood up. There is no we. I came here as a courtesy, because I knew your father. But I'm not dying for your mistake. He headed for the door, then stopped. You have 2 options. 1. Let her go, disappear, and pray he's merciful. 2. Use her as a bargaining chip and hope he values her life more than your death. That's it? That's your advice. Sal turned back. Option 3 is you do nothing, and in a few days, you won't exist anymore. Your money, your connections, your reputation gone. You'll be erased so thoroughly that people will forget you ever lived. He walked out, leaving the door open behind him. The warehouse erupted into chaos. This is bullshit, Marco said, standing. It's scare tactics. Some washed-up gangster doesn't just. He's not washed up, Jackson interrupted. His military training made him assess threats clearly. Look at the pattern. Davies turned. Our contacts ghosted. The raid was too precise. Someone with serious reach is dismantling our operation. Torres nodded. And he hasn't shown his face yet. That's the scariest part. He's letting us panic. Rico ran his hands through his slicked back hair. For the first time, he looked young.
Scared.
Okay, we use her. We negotiate. We negotiate with what? Torres said. He obviously doesn't care about money or territory anymore. He only cares about her. All eyes turned to Lena. She met their gazes steadily, her heart pounding but her face calm. We could kill her, Marco said casually. Send him a message that we're not afraid. And guarantee he kills us all? Jackson shook his head.
No.
We fortify. We prepare. And when he comes, because he will come, we're ready. Evan stood frozen by the wall, his face white. His eyes met Lena's across the warehouse. She saw the question there. How do I survive this? She wished she had an answer. Because somewhere out there Alessio was coming. And mercy was no longer on the table. The warehouse felt smaller after Sal's visit, like the walls had shifted inward. Rico's crew had divided into camps. Marco wanted to fight, fortify the warehouse, bring in more guns, show strength. Jackson and Torres wanted to negotiate, reach out through intermediaries, offer money, find a diplomatic solution. Rico bounced between both, his confidence evaporating by the hour. Lena watched it all unfold from her chair, her wrists still bound but looser now. Evan had been adjusting them each time he brought her food or water, a small rebellion he thought no one noticed. But she noticed everything. It was 9:47 p.m. when Evan finally cracked. He'd been standing guard near her for the past 2 hours while the others argued in the office at the far end of the warehouse. His phone buzzed constantly, texts he read with increasingly pale expressions. You okay? Lena asked softly. He jumped, like he'd forgotten she could speak.
I've fine.
You don't look fine. Evan glanced toward the office where raised voices echoed, then back at her. My sister, he said quietly. She needs another treatment. The hospital's asking for payment up front. How much? 15,000, he laughed bitterly. I've got maybe 3 in savings. Rico promised me a big cut from this shipment, but now he gestured vaguely at the chaos. Now everything's falling apart, and I'm stuck guarding a woman who shouldn't even be here. Lena chose her words carefully. You could let me go. I can't, but his voice lacked conviction. Yes, you can.
Walk me to the door right now.
Tell them I overpowered you, or that you fell asleep. They're too distracted to notice. Marco would kill me. You don't understand these people. I understand you're a good person trapped in a bad situation, Lena said. I understand your sister needs you alive more than she needs that money. Evan stared at her, war written across his young face. Before he could respond, the office door banged open. Rico stormed out, Marco right behind him. We're moving her, Rico announced.
Tonight.
To the safe house near the industrial park. Jackson emerged from the office. That's a mistake. If we move, we're exposed. Unknown territory. This place is compromised, Rico snapped. Sal knows we're here, which means Moretti knows. We move, we stay ahead of him. You can't stay ahead of a ghost, Torres muttered, but nobody argued further. Within 20 minutes, they were packing. Weapons in duffel bags. Cash from a hidden safe. Lena watched them scramble, saw the fear beneath their bravado. Marco walked over to her, grabbing her chair and dragging it toward the loading area. The metal legs screeched against concrete. You're coming with us, sweetheart. Hope you like car rides. Evan followed, his expression tortured. They loaded Lena into a white van, no windows, just darkness and the smell of old carpet. Marco and Evan sat in the back with her while Rico drove. Jackson and Torres followed in a separate car. The city passed in sounds, traffic, sirens, the rumble of the engine. Lena counted turns, trying to map their route mentally. Left, right, straight for a long time, right again. How long you think we got? Marco asked casually, checking his pistol. Until what? Evan said. Until the Ghost King finds us, Marco grinned, but it was tight. You believe that story? I looked him up, Evan said quietly. While you guys were arguing.
Alessandro Moretti.
There's almost nothing online. It's all been scrubbed. But I found old news articles. Unsolved disappearances. Cold cases. All connected to his name before they went dark. So Sal wasn't lying. He's real. And where Evan trailed off. We're dead, Marco finished. Maybe. Or maybe Rico's right, and we fight our way out. He looked at Lena. What do you think? Your husband coming for you? Lena met his eyes. Yes. You sound pretty confident. I am. Something in her tone made Marco uncomfortable. He turned away, muttering under his breath. The van stopped. Doors opened. They'd arrived at the safe house, a two-story building in an industrial wasteland, surrounded by abandoned factories and empty lots.
No neighbors. No witnesses.
They dragged Lena inside to a basement room with concrete walls and a single bulb hanging from the ceiling. They secured her to a different chair, this time with actual handcuffs chained to a pipe. More comfortable than the warehouse, Rico said, trying for humor. We'll be out of here in 2 days. Thursday deals postponed but not cancelled. You stay quiet. You stay alive. He left. Marco followed. Only Evan remained, hovering in the doorway. Please, Lena said softly. You know this is wrong. I know, his voice cracked. But I don't know how to fix it. Help me. When they're asleep, come back down here. Unlock these cuffs. I'll run. They'll never know it was you. They'll know. Evan looked at her with haunted eyes. My sister. If I betray Rico, Marco will. He couldn't finish the sentence. If you don't, my husband will. Lena's voice was gentle but firm. And whatever Marco would do to your sister, Alessio will do worse to all of you. I've seen him angry, Evan. I've seen what he becomes when someone threatens what he loves. Then we're all dead anyway. Not if you choose right. Not if you help me. Evan stood there for a long moment, trembling. Then he turned and walked upstairs, locking the door behind him. Lena sat alone in the basement, the single bulb casting harsh shadows. But she wasn't afraid. Because somewhere in the darkness above, she could feel it, the approaching storm that wore her husband's face. And when it arrived, these men would finally understand what they'd unleashed. Upstairs, Evan sat on the floor outside the basement door, his phone in his shaking hands. He'd made his decision. He just hoped he'd survive it. Alessio sat in his car 2 blocks from the warehouse in Riverside, watching it through binoculars. Empty. Victor's text had come through 20 minutes ago. They moved her. Scrambling. Heard they're heading to the industrial park safe house. Alessio set down the binoculars and started the engine. He didn't speed. Didn't rush. Panic was for prey. He was the hunter, and hunters moved with patience. His phone rang. Marcus. They're falling apart, Marcus said without preamble. I've got 3 different sources saying Rico's crew is fragmenting. The ex-military guys want to negotiate. The cousin wants to fight. The kid is having a breakdown. The kid. Evan Torres. 23, sister with cancer, got recruited 6 months ago. He's in way over his head. Marcus paused. He might flip. Find a way to contact him. Quietly. What do you want me to say? That he has one chance to walk away from this alive. Alessio's voice was ice. He helps me get Lena back. I make sure his sister gets the treatment she needs, and he disappears somewhere safe. He refuses, he burns with the rest. Carrot and stick. Classic. Marcus's keyboard clicked in the background. I'm sending you the safe house location now. 2-story, isolated, probably 4 to 6 guys inside. You want backup?
No.
Alessio, going in alone is. I'm not going in yet. I'm cutting off every escape route first, he ended the call. At 11:34 p.m., Rico's cousin Marco stepped outside the safe house for a cigarette. He lasted 3 drags before a black sedan pulled up. The window rolled down. Victor Calabrese looked out, his weathered face expressionless. Marco Valdez. Marco's hand went to his gun. Who's asking? Someone who wants to make sure you understand the situation. Victor held up a tablet, showing a bank account. Marco's bank account. $47,000. Earned through cocaine distribution, armed robbery, and extortion. Victor swiped. Here's your mother's address. Your girlfriend's workplace. Your safe deposit box at First National. Marco went pale. What the hell is this? This is your life, laid out on a screen. The Ghost King knows everything about you. Where you sleep. Where you eat. Who you love. Victor's voice was conversational, almost friendly. He's giving you a choice. Walk away tonight. Leave the city. Never come back. And you keep your life. Stay, and by Friday you won't exist. I'm not scared of some washed-up. Victor laughed. Yes, you are. I can see it in your eyes. You've been jumpy all day. You know what's coming. Marco tried to sneer, but his hands trembled. Rico's my cousin. I don't abandon family. Then you'll die with him. Victor's window rolled up, and the sedan drove away. Marco stood alone in the dark, his cigarette burning down to the filter. Inside the safe house, tensions boiled over. We should have killed her already, Marco said, pacing the living room. Send Moretti a message. And guarantee he murders us all? Jackson slammed his hand on the table. You're thinking with your ego, not your brain. Rico sat on the couch, head in his hands. His phone was in pieces. He'd smashed it an hour ago after another contact refused to answer. We need leverage. We need to let her go, Torres interrupted. Everyone turned to stare at him. I'm serious. We release her unharmed. We run. We disappear. It's the only move.
Coward, Marco spat.
Realist, Torres stood. I did 2 tours in Afghanistan. I know what a superior enemy looks like. This guy's had 12 hours and he's already destroyed half our operation without showing his face. What do you think happens when he actually comes for us? The room fell silent. Evan sat in the corner, barely breathing. His phone buzzed unknown number. He glanced at the screen. Your sister Sarah needs treatment. $15,000 at City General. I can make that happen tonight. All you have to do is help me get my wife back. Open the basement door at 2 a.m. Walk away. I'll handle the rest. You and Sarah will be protected. You have my word. Evan's blood ran cold. How did he know Sarah's name? How did he know about the hospital? Another text. Or stay loyal to Rico and watch your sister die while you rot in prison. Your choice. Respond with yes or a no. Evan's hands shook so badly, he nearly dropped the phone. Across the room, Marco was still arguing for violence. Jackson was arguing for negotiation. Rico looked like he might throw up. They were all dead. Evan could see it clearly now. This wasn't a fight they could win. The Ghost King wasn't coming with guns and threats. He was coming like a surgeon, cutting away their support until they collapsed. Evan thought about Sarah in her hospital bed, pale and weak, asking when she could come home. He thought about Lena in the basement, kind despite her captivity, seeing him as human when no one else did. He thought about the choice that would define everything. His fingers moved, yes. The response was immediate. Smart man.
2 Uhr nachts.
Leave the basement door unlocked and the back entrance open. Walk to the corner of Industrial and 5th. A car will pick you up. Your sister's treatment starts at 7 a.m. Evan deleted the texts and looked up. Marco and Jackson were still arguing. Rico had his head in his hands. Torres was checking his weapon. None of them noticed Evan slip downstairs. Lena looked up when the door opened. Evan descended the steps slowly, holding a key. I'm helping you, he whispered. But you have to wait until 2. I'll unlock everything then. Your husband, he contacted me. He promised to help my sister. Lena's eyes filled with tears. Thank you. Don't thank me yet, Evan's voice cracked.
I'm terrified.
You're doing the right thing. That takes courage. Evan nodded, not trusting his voice, and went back upstairs. Lena sat in the darkness, her heart pounding. Alessia was coming. And the net was finally closing. At 1:47 a.m., Rico stood at the window of the safe house, staring into darkness. The industrial park was a graveyard of abandoned factories and empty lots.
No lights.
No life. Just rust and silence. It should have felt safe, isolated, defensible. Instead, it felt like a trap. His phone, the replacement he bought 3 hours ago, buzzed. Unknown number. Against his better judgment, he answered.
Rico Valdez.
The voice was quiet, almost gentle.
Male.
Calm as still water. Rico's throat went dry. Who is this? You know who this is. The Ghost King. Rico's legs nearly gave out. He grabbed the windowsill for support. Listen, we can talk about this. You took something that belongs to me. It was a mistake. A misunderstanding. We'll let her go right now, no conditions. You've had 36 hours to let her go. Alessio's voice remained perfectly even. You chose to move her instead. To chain her in a basement. To debate whether to kill her. We were never going to. How do you know that? I know everything, Rico. I know you're standing at the north window right now. I know Marco's smoking in the kitchen. I know Jackson and Torres are arguing about whether to run. I know Evan Torres is 3 minutes away from betraying you. Rico spun around, looking at his crew. Marco was indeed in the kitchen, cigarette dangling from his lips. Jackson and Torres were by the back door, voices low and tense. You're bluffing, Rico said, but his voice shook. Your cocaine contact in Venezuela, Carlos Mendoza, just got arrested. Your money launderer in the Caymans froze your accounts. Your lawyer received evidence of your crimes via anonymous email 20 minutes ago. Alessio paused. I'm not fighting you, Rico. I'm erasing you. What do you want? I want you to understand something. For the first time, emotion crept into Alessio's voice, cold fury wrapped in silk. You can't negotiate. You can't fight. You can't run. Your only option is to pray that when I arrive, I'm feeling merciful. The line went dead. Rico stood frozen. Phone pressed to his ear, his reflection ghostly in the dark window. Behind that reflection, in the abandoned factory across the street, Alessio lowered his own phone and checked his watch. 13 minutes until 2 a.m. Marco stormed into the living room. We're sitting ducks here. I say we move again, right now. Move where? Torres exploded. He knows everything. Our locations, our contacts, He stopped looking around. Where's Evan? Everyone realized simultaneously that Evan was gone. That little rat, Marco snarled, pulling his gun. He headed for the stairs. I'll check on the girl. Wait, Jackson grabbed his arm. If Evan flipped, Moretti knows we're vulnerable. This could be a setup. The lights went out. The entire safe house plunged into darkness.
Generator, Rico Bart.
Marco checked A sound outside. Footsteps on gravel. Multiple vehicles. Jackson rushed to the window, and his face drained of color. We've got company. 4 black SUVs surrounded the building, high beams flooding the safe house with blinding light. But nobody emerged. The vehicles just sat there, engines running, lights blazing. Waiting. How many? Rico's voice cracked. I count at least 12 guys. Maybe more. Jackson pulled back from the window. We're outnumbered. Then we use the girl. Marco headed for the basement stairs. We bring her up. We negotiate. He yanked open the basement door and froze. The chains hung empty. Lena was gone.
No, Marco, breathe. No, no, no.
He thundered down the stairs. The handcuffs were unlocked, hanging open. The back basement window, small, barely noticed, was ajar. She'd escaped. Or been extracted. Marco ran back upstairs, his face white.
She's gone.
Evan let her out. I'm going to kill that. Evan's already gone, Torres said quietly. He was looking at his phone. I just got a text.
I'm sorry.
I couldn't do this anymore. Good luck, he sold us out. Rico's world tilted. Everything was falling apart. His crew. His operation.
His life.
The phone in his hand rang again. Same number. He answered with shaking hands. She's safe now, Alessio said. Which means you've lost your only leverage. Please, Rico whispered. We'll disappear. You'll never see us again. I swear. You're right. You will disappear. Alessio's voice was death itself. But not yet. First, you're going to surrender to the police cars that will arrive in 4 minutes. You're going to confess to kidnapping, drug trafficking, and conspiracy. You're going to name every contact, every location, every crime. I'll go to prison for life.
Yes.
But you'll live. Your mother will keep her house. Your girlfriend will keep her job. You'll exist, Rico. Just behind bars, the line crackled. Or you can refuse, and I'll make sure you and everyone you love ceases to exist.
No grabes.
No memory. Just nothing. Rico's legs gave out. He collapsed onto the couch. For minutes, Alessio repeated. Sirens in the distance. Hear them? Rico did. Faint, but growing louder. Police. Lots of them. How do I know you'll keep your word? Rico asked. You don't. But I've never broken a promise in my life. Alessio paused. Your mother's name is Teresa. She lives on Maple Street. She makes you tamales every Sunday. I could have hurt her already. I didn't. Because I'm not like you. I don't hurt innocent people. The sirens grew louder. Marco looked at Rico. Jackson looked at Torres. They all understood. It was over. 3 minutes, Alessio said and hung up. Rico dropped the phone and put his head in his hands. Torres set his gun on the table first. Then Jackson. Finally, reluctantly, Marco. When the police kicked in the door 90 seconds later, they found 4 men sitting with their hands up, defeated and silent. And somewhere in the darkness, Alessio Moretti held his wife, safe, whole, alive, and finally allowed himself to breathe. The Ghost King had won without firing a single shot. Just like he always did. Alessio didn't watch the arrests. He was 3 blocks away, parked behind an abandoned textile factory, when Lena climbed into the passenger seat. Her clothes were dirty, her wrists bruised from the restraints, her hair disheveled. She was the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen. Alessio, she breathed. He pulled her into his arms, careful of her injuries, his control finally cracking. His hands shook as he held her, his face buried in her hair. For 36 hours he'd been ice. Now, with her safe, the fear he'd been suppressing crashed through him like a wave. I'm okay, she whispered.
I'm okay.
You found me. Always, his voice was rough. I will always find you. They sat there for a long moment, holding each other in the darkness, while sirens wailed in the distance. Finally, Lena pulled back, studying his face. You didn't hurt them.
No.
You could have. Yes, Alessio's jaw tightened. But you wouldn't have wanted me to. And becoming that man again, he touched her cheek gently. It would have killed the part of me that you love. Tears filled Lena's eyes. What happened to them? Police have them. They'll confess to everything. Kidnapping, trafficking, conspiracy. They'll go to prison for a very long time, he started the car. And the underworld will remember what happens when someone touches what's mine. And Evan. Safe. His sister's treatment starts in 5 hours. He'll have a new identity, a fresh start somewhere far from here. Alessio glanced at her. You asked me to spare him. So I did. Lena leaned her head against his shoulder as they drove through empty streets toward home. But Alessio hadn't told her everything. Because while Rico and his crew sat in police custody, confessing their crimes, there was still one loose end. One person who needed to understand, truly, deeply understand, what they'd unleashed. At 4:17 a.m., Alessio pulled up to the warehouse in Riverside. The same warehouse where they'd first held Lena. It was abandoned now, Rico's crew scattered. Almost abandoned. Marco Valdez sat inside, hands zip-tied behind his back, secured to the same chair where Lena had been held. He'd never made it to the safe house arrest. Victor's men had grabbed him during his cigarette break, brought him here, and called Alessio. Now Alessio walked through the warehouse door alone, his footsteps echoing in the vast space. Marco looked up, his face bruised from where he'd tried to fight. When he saw Alessio, really saw him for the first time, the bravado drained from his expression. Alessio wasn't imposing physically. Average height, lean build, wearing a simple black jacket. No weapons visible. No threats in his posture. But his eyes. His eyes were ancient and cold, like staring into a grave. You wanted to kill her, Alessio said quietly, stopping 10 feet away. You argued for it. Multiple times. I was just talking, Marco said quickly. I wouldn't have actually. Don't lie to me. Alessio's voice was barely above a whisper, but it cut through the space like a blade. I heard every conversation. I know exactly who you are, Marco Valdez. I know about the college student you put in the hospital last year. The store owner you beat half to death. The people you've hurt because you enjoy hurting people. Marco tried to look defiant.
So kill me then.
Prove you're the monster everyone says you are. I'm not going to kill you. Something about the way Alessio said it was worse than any threat. Your cousin Rico will spend the next 20 years in federal prison, Alessio continued. Jackson and Torres cut deals. They'll get 5 to 7. But you, he tilted his head slightly. You assaulted a federal officer during arrest. Resisted violently. And when they search your apartment, they'll find enough evidence to add another 15 years to your sentence. You planted evidence. I provided evidence. There's a difference, Alessio stepped closer. You'll be in maximum security by Monday. And I've already had conversations with certain people inside. People who owe me favors. People who don't like men who hurt women. Marco's face went white. He understood what that meant. Prison wasn't just time, it was survival. And Alessio had just made sure his survival would be very, very difficult. But here's what's important, Alessio said, his voice dropping even lower. Every day you're inside, you'll remember this moment. You'll remember that you could have lived free if you'd just left one innocent woman alone. You'll remember that your suffering, every single second of it, is because you thought she was weak. He crouched down, meeting Marco's eyes at level.
She's not weak.
She's precious. And precious things are protected by monsters far worse than you. Alessio stood and walked toward the door. Wait, Marco called out, his voice cracking. You can't just leave me here. The police will arrive in 20 minutes. Victor called them. They'll find you exactly where you deserve to be. Tied up, helpless, knowing that your entire life was destroyed by the man you underestimated. Alessio paused at the door, looking back one last time. You wanted to send me a message by killing her. Instead, you've become my message to everyone else. His expression was colder than death.
Never. Touch. What's. Mean it.
He walked out, leaving Marco screaming threats that echoed in the empty warehouse. Outside, Victor leaned against a car, smoking. That was merciful by your standards. Lena asked me not to become the monster, Alessio said quietly. So I didn't. But he'll wish I had. Victor nodded slowly. The city's talking. By morning, every criminal will know what happened. The Ghost King came back, dismantled an entire crew, and never threw a punch.
Good.
Maybe they'll remember next time. Alessio drove away, back toward home, where Lena was waiting. Behind him, sirens approached the warehouse. And the legend grew darker. Alessio arrived at the lumber storage yard at dawn. It hadn't been part of the plan. Rico's crew was arrested. Marco was headed to prison. The threat was neutralized. But Victor's text at 5:43 a.m. changed everything. Rico escaped transport. Took a hostage, female officer. Heading to the lumber yard on Route 9. He's got nothing to lose now. Alessio's blood ran cold. He'd left Lena at home, sleeping finally, safe under Victor's protection. But Rico was desperate now, cornered and dangerous. Men with nothing to lose made catastrophic choices. He pulled into the lumber yard as the sun crept over the horizon, painting everything in shades of orange and red. Massive stacks of timber created corridors and dead ends. A maze designed for storing wood, now repurposed as a last stand. Rico's voice echoed from somewhere deep inside. I know you're here, Eddie. I can feel you. Alessio walked forward slowly, his hands visible and empty. No gun.
No weapon.
Just a man in a black jacket moving through the shadows of stacked lumber. Let the officer go, Rico. Alessio called out, his voice calm. This is between us. Between us? Rico's laugh was unhinged. You destroyed my life. My crew's in jail, my money's frozen, my reputation's gone. I've got nothing. You have your life. That's more than you deserve. Alessio rounded a corner of stacked pine and found them. Rico stood in a clearing surrounded by lumber walls, one arm wrapped around a female police officer's throat, a gun pressed to her temple. The officer, young, maybe 26, had blood on her forehead and terror in her eyes. But it was the second figure that made Alessio's world stop. Lena. She stood 20 feet to Rico's left, her hands raised, her clothes still dirty from captivity. Victor was behind her, his expression apologetic and furious. She insisted. Victor said quietly. Knocked out one of my guards and took his car. Got here 2 minutes before you. Alessio's carefully constructed control cracked. Lena, get out of here.
Now.
No, her voice was steady despite the fear in her eyes. I won't let you become the monster again. This isn't your choice. Yes, it is. She took a step forward toward Rico. Because I know what you're planning. I can see it in your eyes. You're going to hurt him. Maybe not physically, but you'll destroy what's left of him. And that will destroy what's left of you. He took you, Alessio said, his voice raw. He chained you in a basement. He debated killing you. I know. I was there. Lena's eyes were full of tears, but her voice never wavered. And I'm still choosing mercy. Not for him. For you. Rico watched this exchange with wild eyes, his gun hand shaking. Shut up. Both of you shut up. Let the officer go, Lena said, turning to Rico. Please. You're scared and desperate, but you're not evil. Not really. You made terrible choices, but you can still make one good one. Good choices. Rico's voice cracked. I'm going to prison for life because of him. No, you're going to prison because you kidnapped me, Lena said firmly. You did that. You made that choice. He just held you accountable. I should kill you right now. Both of you, but Rico's gun hand trembled more violently. I should. You should let her go and face what comes next with dignity, Lena interrupted. Because killing a police officer doesn't save you. It just makes you a murderer on top of everything else. Alessio moved forward, unable to stay back any longer. Every instinct screamed to attack, to end this, to ensure Rico never threatened anyone again. But Lena stepped between them. Her small frame blocked his path, her hand reaching back to touch his chest. The gesture stopped him completely, not because she could physically restrain him, but because her touch reminded him who he'd chosen to become. Please, she whispered, looking up at him. Let me try. Trust me like I trust you. Alessio stared down at her, seeing the strength that had nothing to do with violence. The courage that came from choosing kindness when cruelty would be easier. She'd done it for him 7 years ago, seen the monster, and chosen to love the man underneath. Now she was doing it again. Slowly, Alessio stepped back. His hands remained at his sides. His eyes never left Rico, but he yielded to Lena's choice. She turned back to Rico, taking another step forward despite the gun. You're scared. I understand. But look at me, Rico. Really look. She gestured to her bruised wrists, her dirty clothes. You hurt me. You terrified me. But I'm still standing here asking you to choose better. Because I believe people can change. I've seen it. Her eyes flicked to Alessio. I married a man who was once feared throughout the city. A man who could have killed you and your entire crew without losing sleep. But he chose differently. He chose me. He chose peace. She was close enough now that Rico could have grabbed her. Alessio's entire body tensed, ready to move faster than thought if needed. Choose differently, Rico, Lena said softly. Let her go. Put the gun down. Face justice instead of adding murder to your crimes. Show me I'm right about people's capacity for redemption. Rico stared at her, his face crumbling. The gun wavered. I'm so tired, he whispered. I know. Then rest. Let this end. For 10 seconds, the world held its breath. Then Rico's arm loosened around the officer's throat. The gun lowered slightly. Okay, he breathed. Okay. He released the officer, who scrambled away. The gun clattered to the ground. Rico collapsed to his knees, sobbing. And Alessio stood perfectly still, watching his wife, this shy, gentle waitress, disarm a desperate criminal with nothing but words and compassion. She turned to him, exhausted and beautiful and impossibly strong. He crossed the distance in 3 strides and pulled her into his arms. "You're terrifying," he whispered against her hair. She laughed weakly. "I learned from the best." 3 weeks later, Lena stood in their kitchen, stirring marinara sauce while Alessio chopped garlic beside her. It was 6:47 p.m. on a Thursday. The October sun had set an hour ago, leaving the world dark and cool outside their warm home. Inside, pasta boiled on the stove, filling the air with steam and the smell of basil. Normal.
Ordinary. Perfect.
Alessio's hand brushed against hers as he reached for the cutting board. She caught his fingers, squeezing gently. He smiled, the soft smile reserved only for her, so different from the cold expression that had terrified grown men in lumber yards and warehouses. "How's work?" he asked, adding garlic to the pan. It sizzled, fragrant and sharp. "Quiet." Jenny asked about my vacation. Lena had returned to the diner a week ago, claiming she'd taken time off for a family emergency. The owner hadn't questioned it, especially after an anonymous donor paid to fix the neon sign, repave the parking lot, and give all employees a raise. "I think she suspects something, but she's too polite to ask." "Good." Alessio tasted the sauce, added salt. "The less people know, the safer everyone stays." The bruises on Lena's wrists had faded to yellow-green shadows. The nightmares came less frequently now. She'd had 3 therapy sessions with a trauma counselor Victor had recommended, someone discreet who understood that certain questions shouldn't be asked. She was healing. They both were. The doorbell rang. Alessio tensed immediately, his hand moving toward the knife drawer before he caught himself. 7 years of peace, 3 weeks of violence, and his instincts were still rewiring back to civilian life. "I'll get it," Lena said, squeezing his shoulder as she passed. She opened the door to find a young woman on the porch, early 20s, thin, wearing a hospital bracelet under her jacket sleeve. Her eyes were nervous but determined. "Hi," the woman said.
I'm Sara Torres.
"Evan's sister." Lena's heart jumped. "Sarah, come in, please." Sarah entered hesitantly, clutching a small bakery box. Alessio appeared from the kitchen, drying his hands on a towel. Sarah's eyes widened when she saw him, recognition mixed with fear. "Mr. Moretti," she said quietly, "I wanted to thank you."
For my treatment.
"For my brother." For she struggled for words. "For everything." Alessio's expression softened. "How is Evan?" "Safe. Happy, I think. He calls me every week from Portland. He's working construction, starting over." Tears filled her eyes. "The doctors say I'm in remission. They say the treatment you paid for saved my life."
I'm glad.
"I brought you something." "It's not much," but Sarah opened the bakery box, revealing homemade empanadas. "My grandmother's recipe. Evan said that you didn't have to help us. That most people wouldn't have." Lena took the box, her own eyes misty. "Your brother made a brave choice. He helped me when he didn't have to. This is just returning the kindness." Sarah nodded, wiping her eyes. "He told me what happened. What you stopped him from becoming." She looked at Alessio. "Everyone says you're terrifying. But Evan says you saved him from himself." "Your brother saved himself," Alessio said quietly. "I just gave him the option." Sarah left 10 minutes later, after hugs from Lena and a promise to keep in touch. When the door closed, Alessio pulled Lena back into the kitchen. They finished cooking in comfortable silence, moving around each other with practiced ease. Dinner was simple. Pasta with marinara, garlic bread, a cheap wine they both loved. They ate at the small kitchen table, knees touching underneath, talking about nothing important, a movie they wanted to see, repairs the house needed, whether they should get a cat. The kind of conversation that people who'd survived darkness treasured most. "Victor called yesterday," Alessio said eventually. Rico's trial starts next month. He's pleading guilty, cooperating with everything. And Marco. Maximum security. He'll be there for 23 years minimum. Alessio's voice hardened slightly. He's exactly where he belongs. Lena nodded, setting down her fork. Do you think it's really over? The immediate threat? Yes. But Alessio reached across the table, taking her hand. The city knows I came back. That the Ghost King still exists when needed. Some people will respect that boundary. Others will test it eventually. And when they do, I'll handle it. Without becoming the monster, he brought her hand to his lips, kissing her bruised wrist gently. You showed me that power doesn't require cruelty. That strength can be measured in mercy. You already knew that, Lena said softly. You just forgot for a moment. They finished dinner and washed dishes together, hands in warm, soapy water, comfortable silence wrapping around them like a blanket. Later, they sat on the couch, Lena curled against Alessio's chest while an old movie played on TV. His arms encircled her protectively, her breathing synchronized with his heartbeat. Safe. Home. Together. Outside their window, the city continued its eternal rhythm, sirens in the distance, cars passing, life happening in 1,000 variations. And somewhere in that city, in bars and back rooms and shadowy corners, people whispered a story. The story of cocky gangsters who'd kidnapped a shy waitress, not knowing she was married to the Ghost King. The story of how they'd been dismantled without violence, erased without murder, punished without death. The story ended the same way every time. Never touch what belongs to him. Never threaten what he loves. Because the Ghost King doesn't kill his enemies. He makes them wish they'd never been born. But inside a small house on a quiet street, the man they called the Ghost King held his wife and whispered, I love you. And the shy waitress who'd tamed a monster whispered back, I love you more. The city could have its legends and fears. They had something better. They had each other. And that was worth more than any empire, any reputation, any throne built on ashes. Alessio Moretti had walked away from the underworld once before. This time, he knew he'd never have to return. Because the most powerful thing he'd ever possessed wasn't fear or control or violence. It was the quiet strength of the woman sleeping in his arms, who'd chosen to see the man beneath the monster and loved him anyway. And for that gift, he would spend the rest of his life being worthy. Not as the Ghost King. Just as Alessio. Her husband. Her home. Her peace. The end.